Hi, it's Lou from Christian Faith and Fiction. I have some Christian fiction books to share with you this week. These are books that I've read recently and I keep my thoughts as a sort of diary as I'm going along. So there are a few different books for you, some novellas, historical fiction, contemporary romance, and Christian fantasy. And I've heard some really good reading books, so some 5-star reads. So I hope you enjoy taking a look with me. I hope it helps you to decide whether these are books that you would like to read for yourself. So I finally finished reading The Light of Iden by Karen Hancock. This book was actually published about 20 years ago, but they've been re-releasing anniversary, I guess, editions of it in hardback. The first 3 books in this series all won the Christie Award for Christian Fiction. There are 4 books in the series. This was the first one. This was the shortest one, I think, and it's fairly long. It may not look it from here, but actually the audiobook was 18 hours long, so I listened to it on a faster speed, but still it took me over 2 weeks to read it through. But it does have some fantastic Christian allegory in it. The faith content is there very much all the way through it, which I really enjoyed. It is following a character called Abram, who at the beginning of the book has another name. He is studying to become a kind of a religious elite in his country. So to me it felt like a cross between a Pharisee and a monk that he was studying to become. And he had been part of this order, and they sort of worship these flames that are in their capital city. He is actually one of the sons of the king, but not at the time the heir to the throne. His family they're known for being fighters, and he sort of renounced that and got into these religious order. So he's on the eve, at the beginning of the book, he's on the eve of taking his vows and trying to become part of this sect. And then everything sort of changes around and things happen, and I don't want to say anything because there's lots of twists in there. As it says in the book description, I just checked, he ends up being sold into slavery. And everything in his life changes, everything he thought he knew gets changed around, all of his beliefs, suddenly everything's changed. So on the outside, this is like an epic fantasy. There's a lot of sort of action and twists and different betrayals, and you get to see various places in the world. You get to see some of how the races interact with each other. There's some racial tension. You get to see the different belief systems that different countries have and different peoples have. It's really an allegory for the early church. It feels like the early church. So sometimes it felt like reminded me of the book of Daniel, and then other times it reminded me of the Acts, and then later on it sort of reminded me of Revelation. There's a lot of Bible references without being any, to me there wasn't a clear retelling of anything particular, but there was lots of references to the Christian faith. And there are some people who are very dedicated, almost Pharisaical, kind of almost like Jews. It's an allegory, obviously, so I'm sort of putting an interpretation on there, but it feels like there are some who are a bit like the Jewish people, and then there are some who are like Christians and trying to find the true faith and trying to get people to accept the true faith, but other people think they're completely wrong. There's a lot going on in this story and in this world. This is just book 1, and this was fairly long book, and there are 4 books and they're all longer, so this is one for people who like epic fantasy. The faith content was fantastic, as I said. That's one of the things that stands out to me as being really good in this book. Content wise, there is violence in there. It is descriptive in some parts, but although I am quite squeamish about that, I was okay with it. There is one scene where there's a bedroom scene. You don't see the actual act, but for me it was a little bit steamy leading up to that point, but you don't actually see what happens. But it makes sense in the story, and it does have consequences as well as the story goes on. So I was okay with it, although I would have liked it a little bit less descriptive about the sort of the lust side of it. Yeah, it's only one scene though. So I am interested to see where this story goes. I'm really relieved that it was a genuine Christian fantasy book, and I would give it 3 out of 3 for Christian faith rating and 9 out of 10 for a reading enjoyment rating. I finished reading the second novella in this collection, that is In Tune with Love by Amy Matayo. This is clean, sort of contemporary Christian romance. It is following a character called April, who is a singer and a waitress in a bar in Nashville. She's trying to get her break. She writes song lyrics. Then it sort of moves forwards to the future where her sister is getting married, and her sister is a bit of a bridezilla, but she calls in April to be her last minute wedding coordinator when her coordinator quits, and she also calls in somebody who is April's sort of arch nemesis enemy as the wedding singer. I'm deliberately missing out sort of chunks of information in this because it's a very short novella and I don't want to give away too much of the plot, because there isn't, there's not a huge amount in it to say. But basically they are total enemies, and there's something that's happened that April really doesn't like this guy, and her sister brings him in as a wedding singer for her wedding. I thought this was an interesting romance. There's plenty of conflict there, both between the two main characters and the family, within the family dynamics. There's a small amount of Christian faith content in there. There are also themes of forgiveness, repentance, reconciliation, that kind of thing. So overall, I thought it was a fairly good story, and there was quite a lot sort of packed into that to do with the characters. So I would give it 8 out of 10 for story enjoyment and a 1 out of 3 for Christian faith rating. I finished reading If the Boot Fits by Karen Witemeyer. This is a Western historical romance, and it is Christian fiction, and it's inspired by Cinderella. It actually is only sort of the beginning part is fits in with that, so I wouldn't really call it a retelling, but it does have sort of motifs from Cinderella at the beginning, sort of reversed, but you'll see when I get into the explanation of the beginning of the story. This is mostly historical romance, and for the sort of first part of the book, it felt like a gentle, sweet kind of romance story. There are sort of other subplots that come into it later on, which gives it a bit more jeopardy and action in terms of the outside plot, but I would say majority of this book is a historical romance. It is set in 1889 in Palo Pinto County, Texas. For those of you who know where that is, obviously I realise I know where Texas is, but my geography of USA and particularly within states is not so great, but I'm sure if you live near there you might know where that is. This is following Asher, who is a cattle rancher, and his mother, his sort of stepmother who's raised him, and her brothers have been turfed out of their house that they were living in for not paying the rent. He thinks something untoward went on, and so he breaks into this cattle rancher house, the guy who owns like the cattle ranch, and while he's there he sees this guy's daughter, and she's really annoyed that her dad has invited all these suitors to come to this party so that she might choose one of them. She's not happy about that at all. Asher nearly gets caught whilst looking for this information, and so he has to sort of run away. On the way he loses one of his boots, which Samantha, the daughter, picks up. It's following the story of the two of them and their families and their family struggles, and how Asher and Samantha come to meet, but they don't know each other. There are things about, each other that they don't know, which we know. As I said, it was a gentle, sweet romance to begin with, more action in the second half of the book. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't fault it, really. There was a lot of good faith content in there. One of the characters is a preacher and a preacher's wife, and they have some good faith conversations in there. The romance was really sweet, and the characters were kind of a bit feisty and also just generally nice people, in my opinion. I liked the different relationships with different people. I liked how it turned out. I enjoyed it all the way through. So I would give it 10 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating and 3 out of 3 for Christian faith rating, which is really good. I have finished reading A Beautiful Disguise by Roseanna M. White. This was a fantastic book. I absolutely loved it. I will go so far as to say it could be a contender for my favourite book of the year. Later in the year, I know it's a bit soon for that, but it definitely was one I enjoyed a lot. It is following Lady Marigold Fairfax, who is a Edwardian aristocrat in London. She starts off, she is well known for her fashions and her clothes. She's quite outlandish, she's quite daring. She's a part of the high society there. Her and her brother are actually inherited an estate, and they are struggling to make ends meet. And so in order to do that, in order to make some money, they have started the Imposters, which is a sort of private detective spy kind of agency, but nobody knows who they are. They just get in touch with them and ask them to investigate different things. So they have this sort of double life whereby they are part of the aristocracy, but they are also doing these sort of investigations under the cover of that. They get asked by Sir Merritt Livingston, to investigate a missing agent who he has got a telegram from a message from the continent, and he doesn't understand it, and he employs them to help him investigate. So Marigold is meeting him in her personality as an aristocrat, and also they are also working behind the scenes for him. So it's kind of complicated. I guess you could say it was a historical You've Got Mail. It's got that, maybe not, but it's got that kind of, they know each other, but only one of them knows that they know each other, and they're also corresponding at the same time. Yeah, maybe that's a tenuous link, but yeah, I absolutely loved it. I loved Marigold. I loved her dual life. I loved how complicated that made things. I loved how insecure she was deep down, and all the emotional and character stuff that was going on. I love the mysteries. There's lots of layers of different secrets and mysteries going on, which carries on right to the end, where everything is brought together at the end. I thought that the ending was written really well, and yeah, it's sort of it's the mystery element, suspense element, but also romance as well. I would say the mystery is probably the stronger of the two subplots in there, but they're both really, really good fun, and I loved it. I loved their house. I loved all the stuff that goes with their life, which I don't want to talk about because of spoilers. But yes, fantastic book. Looking forward to reading the rest of this series. Another 5-star book for me from Roseanna M. White, so that's fantastic. I would give it 10 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating and 2 out of 3 for Christian faith rating. The characters are Christians and it does impact on their decisions, but it's not the main plot of the story. I finished reading the last novella in this bind-up collection. It's called Never a Bridesmaid by Janice Thompson, and this is following Mary, whose sister is getting married, and she thinks she's going to be made the maid of honour, but then her sister chooses one of her other friends who isn't quite up to the job so much, and it's really frustrating to Mary. What does make things better is that the best man happens to be a very attractive and famous baseball player, not that Mary's into that. So things develop there. I thought there was a good amount of Christian faith content in there. I thought there was good conflict between the different people and situations going on. I did find the romance a little bit cheesy at times, but it was a quick read. I was done in 2 days, so I give it 8 out of 10 for story enjoyment rating and 3 out of 3 for Christian faith rating. I finished reading God's Smuggler by Brother Andrew. This is a Christian non-fiction book. It's a biography of Brother Andrew. It's following his story as he is being called to go into different communist countries and find Christians there and encourage them and take Bibles in and smuggle them in under the nose of the authorities and things. It was a really inspirational story, emotional, choked me up at times. I really appreciated reading it for the first time. I've known of Open Doors as a charity for some time, so it was really great to read this book. I've also been into some of the countries that he was going into at the time that they were closed off to many people, so that made me quite emotional as well. Like, I've been into Slovakia and hearing about that from that perspective before, and now it's so sort of opened up and that it feels very different. So yeah, it was an emotional read for me, a very inspiring, challenging read, and I really enjoyed reading a biography as a different type of story, true story, to reading fiction and some of the devotional non-fiction. I definitely recommend this one if you are looking to read some more non-fiction books, but you really like story, and also if you like non-fiction and if you've not read it before. I found it really inspiring, so I definitely want to look for some more Christian biographies from the past. I think that would be really good for the future. So I would give this one 10 out of 10 for my rating, and I got a lot from it. So those are the books that I've read recently. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and if you have any thoughts on them, whether they're the same as mine or completely different. I don't mind. Let me know. And also let me know what's the best book that you've read recently. Okay, I hope that you're having a fantastic reading week. If you'd like to see more videos about Christian fiction, you can watch these videos over here. And until next time, I pray God bless you and your families. Okay, bye.